name is Jesse Callum, and the 5 rules they gave me on my first day at Pasco Beach had nothing to do with drowning. And by the end of that summer, drowning was the least of what I was afraid of in that water. I am a lifeguard, have been certified for 3 years, working seasonal positions up and down the Florida Gulf Coast because that is the kind of job that is always available if you are willing to sit in the heat for 8 hours and watch water and not lose your mind doing it. The certification is not hard: CPR, rescue tube technique, a timed swim, a written test on which most of the questions are obvious if you have spent any time near open water. I passed on my first attempt. I have passed every recertification since. The job is not complicated in the way people imagine it is complicated. It is simple and physical and requires a specific kind of attention. Not active attention, not the attention of someone solving a problem, but the flat, sustained attention of someone waiting for a problem to begin. You watch. That is the job. You watch the water and the people in it, and you wait for the moment when one of them needs the other one less than they did a second ago. Pasco Beach, Access Point 7, sits on the Gulf Coast north of Newport Richey on a stretch of Pasco County, shoreline that does not appear in travel guides and does not need to. It is a locals beach, a parking lot, a boardwalk over the dune line, a shower station, a row of rental chairs that the county puts out at 7 and takes in at 6. The sand is wide and flat and the color of old bone, and it gets hot enough by noon that you can feel it through the soles of your shoes. The Gulf water here is shallow for a long way out. You can walk 200 feet from the waterline and still be waist deep, which sounds pleasant and is pleasant right up until you understand what it means for visibility. In shallow, flat water, you cannot see what is moving below the surface from any distance. You see the surface. That is what you get. The lifeguard platform is a raised wooden structure maybe 8 feet off the sand. Red cross on the front panel, faded from the sun to the color of old brick. It has a rail on 3 sides and a lockbox bolted to the right rail and a sight line over the full posted swim zone from flag 1 to flag 4. The chair at the top is a standard white resin chair, of the kind that costs $14 at any hardware store and lasts about 1 season in direct Gulf Coast sun before the plastic starts to go chalky. I went through 2 of them. The whistle is a Fox 40 on a breakaway lanyard. The rescue tube is foam core, orange, 36 inches. You clip it to your waist when you go down to the waterline and you unclip it when you go back up to the platform, because the lanyard catches on the rail and you learn that once and do not learn it again. I took the Pasco Beach posting because I owed $6,200 on a 2019 Honda Civic that no longer existed. The car had gone into a retention pond off Route 200 in January on black ice, which is not something Florida prepares you for because Florida does not generally produce black ice. And yet there it was. And there went the Civic. And there went my insurance rate. And there went my savings. And there I was in February sitting at my mother's kitchen table in Ocala looking at a payment plan for a car I was making payments on from memory because the physical car was at the bottom of a retention pond. The gap between what the insurance paid out and what I still owed the lender was $6,200, which is not a catastrophic number in the abstract and is a very specific number when you do not have it. My mother's house in Ocala is a 2-bedroom ranch on a street with 4 other 2-bedroom ranches that all look like they were built by the same person on the same Tuesday in 1987, which they were. My mother is a good person and the house is a fine house and I was not going to live there. That is not a criticism of either of them. It is just a fact about me and what I needed, which was distance and income in that order. And the Gulf Coast had both if you were willing to get certified and show up and watch water for 8 hours a day in the kind of heat that makes the horizon go soft by 2 in the afternoon. I got the Pasco County seasonal posting in April and started the first week of May. The pay was $14 an hour, which over a full summer season worked out to enough to cover the Honda debt and leave a small margin that I thought of as the cost of not living in Ocala, which seemed fair. The marine biology thing is worth mentioning because it comes up later in a way I did not expect when I was sitting in that classroom. I did 1 semester of it at Florida State College in Jacksonville before I changed my major to something I also did not finish. The semester stuck with me in one specific way, a unit on surface behavior, on reading open water from above. The way the surface of a body of water tells you what is happening below it if you know what to look for. Color shifts that indicate depth changes. Texture variations that indicate current or thermal differences. The behavior of small fish near the surface, when they scatter, when they hold, when they go still, as an indicator of pressure changes below. I found I was good at it. I kept doing it after the class ended, the way you keep doing something your hands have learned, and by the time I was lifeguarding, I was reading water the way some people read faces, automatically without deciding to, the information arriving before the analysis. I mention it because it is the kind of detail that seems like nothing and turns out to be the only thing that mattered. The drive from my sublet in Newport Richey to Pasco Beach Access Point 7 took 11 minutes on a good day and 14 on a bad one. And the difference between a good day and a bad one on that stretch of road was whether the light at the Route 19 intersection caught you, which it did about half the time, and which I eventually stopped being annoyed by because 11 minutes or 14 the Gulf was going to be exactly where I left it. I drove a borrowed Corolla that summer. My roommate's a 2009 with a cracked dashboard and an air conditioning system that worked at about 60% capacity, which in a Florida May means you arrive at work already damp and spend the rest of the day not getting any drier. I left the sublet at 7:15 every morning, and I was on the platform by 7:30, and the beach did not officially open until 8, and those 30 minutes before the first swimmers arrived were the best 30 minutes of the day. The parking lot empty, the sand unmarked. The Gulf doing what the Gulf does in the early morning, which is lie flat and catch the light in a way that looks like something a person would pay to see. Pasco Beach Access Point 7 in the early morning had a specific smell. Salt and sunscreen baked into the boardwalk wood from 10,000 prior summer days, and underneath that something organic and low, the smell of warm, shallow water over a sandy bottom, the specific biology of the Gulf in summer. The boardwalk over the dune line was maybe 40 feet long, and it rattled slightly when you walked it because 2 of the crossboards had worked loose from their fasteners and the county had been meaning to fix them since April. The sand on the other side was wide, maybe 300 feet from the dune line to the water line at low tide, and it held the heat earlier than you expected, so that by 9 in the morning it was already hot enough to move across quickly if you weren't wearing shoes. The rental chairs went out in 2 rows starting at 8. The shower station was at the base of the boardwalk, cold water only, a push-button head that ran for 30 seconds per push. The platform was 20 yards north of the shower station, facing the water, the red cross on its front panel catching the morning light before anything else on the beach did. The swim zone ran from the platform south to a point marked by the first yellow flag and north from the platform to the 4th yellow flag, Zone 4, the northernmost boundary. The flags were on fiberglass poles sunk into the sand at the waterline, and they ran out into the water on a rope line about waist deep to mark the lateral boundary. 3 of the 4 flag poles were the same, weathered fiberglass, the yellow. Flags sun-faded to something closer to cream, the bases packed with sand that had accumulated over multiple seasons. The Zone 4 pole was different. It was newer, the fiberglass unworn, the flag a cleaner yellow, the base sand darker and looser, the kind of dark that means the ground around it has been disturbed and refilled more than once. I noticed it on my first morning and filed it under maintenance, replaced it recently, and moved on. At the water line, 20 feet south of the Zone 4 flag, a large sand-colored dog was sitting with his paws at the exact point where the dry sand met the wet, watching the water. He did not look at me when I walked past. He was already working. Drift belonged to a man named Gordo, who maintained the beach access facilities for the county, the shower station, the boardwalk, the rental chair inventory, the parking lot signage. Gordo was a quiet man in his 60s with a white mustache, and the specific unhurried quality of someone who has done physical work outdoors for so long that the heat and the pace of it have become the same thing. He drove a county utility truck, and he arrived at Access Point 7 every morning before I did, and he left after I did, and in between he fixed things and checked things, and moved through the beach the way a person moves through a space they have, tended long enough to know every loose board and salt-stripped bolt by feel. Drift came with him every day in the bed of the truck and was on the sand before Gordo finished parking. Drift was large, larger than he looked sitting down, which was how I first saw him every morning, already positioned at the waterline when I came over the boardwalk. Sand-colored coat, short and close, the kind that sheds in one long seasonal release and then behaves itself the rest of the year. Amber eyes that tracked movement the way a working dog's eyes track movement. Not with the loose, curious attention of a pet, but with the specific economy of an animal that has decided what matters and filters everything else. He was not unfriendly. He allowed you to approach him, and he accepted a hand on his flank without pulling away. But he did not solicit attention, and he did not follow people up the beach the way beach dogs sometimes do. He had a post, and he kept it. The waterline, from the Zone 1 flag to the Zone 4 flag, was his ground, and he covered it the way I covered the platform, back and forth slow, reading the water. Some mornings I watched him and thought we were doing the same job. Later I understood we were, and that he had been doing it longer, and that he already knew what I was still learning about what was out there. Gordo told me about the waterline thing on my third day when I asked. He said drift had been coming to this beach since he was 8 months old and had not gone past the waterline in 3 years. Not into the Gulf, not even ankle deep on a day when the wash came up high on the sand. He said it like it was a quirk, a thing the dog had decided about himself that nobody had taught him. He said some dogs were just like that about water. I nodded and accepted that and spent the next 3 weeks watching Drift patrol the waterline, with the patience and consistency of an animal that had not decided anything, that had learned something. The way you learn something that changes the rules of where you are willing to go, and had not unlearned it in 3 years and was not going to. The lockbox on the platform rail had a 4-digit combination that the outgoing Lifeguard, a college kid named Brett who was leaving for a summer program in Gainesville and could not get off the beach fast enough, gave me on my first day along with the emergency contact sheet and the county incident log protocol. He said the lockbox had the contacts, the log forms, and a card he described as the beach rules, which he said in a tone that meant he had read it once and not thought about it since. The lockbox was a standard steel utility box, black, the kind with a resettable combination dial on the front that sticks slightly on the third number if you don't push the door in while you turn. Inside, the contact sheet, a stack of incident log forms held with a binder clip, a tube of zinc oxide that someone had left and no one had removed, and behind all of it, in a clear plastic sleeve, a laminated card. The card was not old in the way that suggested neglect. It was the kind of not old that suggested the opposite, that it had been remade recently, the lamination clean and even, the text crisp, the card itself showing no water damage or sun fade. But the text had a quality I recognized from documents that get retyped from older sources, the specific evenness of language that has been transcribed carefully, word by word, from something that could not be kept in its original form. The margins were exact. The 5 items were numbered. There was no header, no department name, no date, no signature. Just the 5 rules, typed in plain language, sealed in plastic, locked in a box on a beach platform in Pasco County, Florida, waiting for whoever opened the box next. I read it standing on the platform with the Gulf behind me and the beach filling up below and Brett already halfway to the parking lot with his bag over his shoulder. My first read was fast, scanning for the shape of it, the way you read a posted sign before deciding if it applies to you. My second read was slower. I looked up once at the Zone 4 flag, which was catching the morning wind and snapping slightly against its pole the way a newer flag does before the fabric softens. Then I looked back at the card. Drift was at the waterline below the platform, not looking at me, looking at the water, doing what he always did. I put the card back in the plastic sleeve and the sleeve back in the lockbox, and I turned the dial and started my first shift and told myself, county liability, post-incident protocol. Someone had a bad summer once and wrote it down. I believed that for about 2 weeks. Rule 1 said, the swim zone is marked by 4 yellow flags. Zone 4 is the northernmost flag. Do not extend the swim zone past Zone 4 under any circumstances, regardless of crowd pressure, weather conditions, or requests from beach supervisors. If a flag is missing or moved, close the full zone and call the county line before replacing it. The county line is a woman named Sandra, whose full name I never learned, and whose voice I learned to read by September. The specific neutral tone. That means I'm logging this, and we both know what we're logging, and neither of us is going to say what we're logging because the form doesn't have a field for it. I read Rule 1 and thought, Zone management. The northernmost boundary is fixed and non-negotiable, which is unusual. Most posted swim zones are adjusted daily based on conditions, crowd size, water clarity, whatever the supervising lifeguard judges appropriate. A hard northern limit that cannot be moved, regardless of supervisor requests, read as either a liability decision made after a specific incident or a bureaucratic overcorrection that nobody had gotten around to revising. Either way, explainable. The flag missing instruction was the part that sat slightly wrong. Close the full zone and call before replacing implied that the flag position mattered enough to require verification before it was restored, which implied the position had been changed before, which implied someone had a reason to change it and someone else had a reason to prevent that. I filed it and moved to Rule 2. Rule 2 said, if the water in the posted swim zone goes flat, no surface movement, no wind response, blow one long whistle and clear the water. Do not wait to confirm. Do not enter the water yourself. Stand on the platform and keep the zone clear until surface movement returns. Log the flat and the duration. I read flat water as a rip current indicator first, which is almost correct. Rip currents do produce surface anomalies, do create areas of unusual calm in otherwise active water. They do not enter instruction fit that reading easily. But rip current protocol does not require you to stay on the platform. It requires you to go in. The instruction to stand and keep the zone clear rather than enter and assist is the inversion of every rip current procedure I had been trained on, and I sat with that inversion for a moment before I produced a rationalization for it, which was, this is shallow water. Rip currents in water this shallow are weak. The platform position gives better visibility for directing swimmers out. I believed about half of that. I kept going. Rule 3 said, between the hours of 11 a.m. and 2 p.m., conduct a visual check of the full swim zone every 15 minutes from the platform. If during any check you cannot see the bottom in Zone 3 or Zone 4, regardless of visibility, conditions that day, clear those zones immediately and do not reopen them until you can. The time window bothered me. 11 to 2 was peak sun. Peak crowd. The hours when visibility was actually best in shallow Gulf water because the sun angle was direct and the water was clearest. A visibility check protocol for the hours of best visibility implied that the check was not about visibility conditions. It was about something specific to those hours that could reduce bottom visibility in Zone 3 and Zone 4 regardless of what the sun and the water were doing. I did not have a rationalization for that one that fully held. I noted it and kept going. Rule 4 said, if a swimmer reports being touched below the waist in water shallower than 4 feet, clear the full zone. Do not ask them to describe what touched them. Do not enter the water to investigate. Log the report as a jellyfish contact and call the county line. The jellyfish log instruction was the specific part. Not log it as unknown contact. Not log it as unconfirmed. Log it as jellyfish. A predetermined category applied before the report was heard, which meant whoever wrote the rule had decided in advance what the official record would say regardless of what the swimmer reported. That is not a safety protocol. That is a documentation protocol, and the difference matters. I wrote a note in my personal log about Rule 4 that night and then crossed it out because I did not know what I intended to do with it. Rule 5 said, if you are on the platform after 6 p.m. and you see something moving north along the shoreline, in the surf zone, low, in the water, moving against the current, do not blow your whistle. Do not call out. Do not point at it. Wait until it has passed the Zone 1 flag going north and then log the time. Nothing else. I read Rule 5 4 times. The no whistle, no call, no point instruction removed every tool a lifeguard has for managing a situation, which meant whoever wrote it had decided that the tools made the situation worse. A whistle gets attention. A call gets attention. A pointed finger gets attention. From the people on the beach, from the people in the water, and from whatever is in the water that you are pointing at. Do not point at it implied that pointing at it produced a response from it, which implied it was aware of being pointed at, which implied a level of awareness that I spent the drive home that night trying to fit into a category that did not require me to take it seriously. I did not find one. I thought about the $6,200, and I thought about the Civic at the bottom of the retention pond, and I thought about my mother's house and the curtains in my room that were the same curtains they had always been. And I drove home anyway, and I went to sleep anyway, and I went back the next morning anyway, because $6,200 does not care what is in the water at Pasco Beach after 6 p.m. 3 weeks of shifts built their shape the way summer jobs do. Fast at first, the newness of the routine giving each day its own texture, and then all at once settled into something that ran on its own without requiring much from me consciously. 7:15 out of the sublet, 14 minutes if the light caught me, on the platform by 7:30. Log open, lockbox checked, zone flags verified. 1 through 4, north to south, all present, all positioned, whistle on the lanyard. Tube clipped. The beach filling up by 9 at capacity by 11. The specific chaos of a public Gulf beach in May giving way to the specific chaos of a public Gulf beach in June, which was the same chaos with more people in it. I watched the water. That was the job, and I did it, and the water was mostly what water is. Shallow and warm and full of people who were having a better time than I was, which was fine. That was the arrangement. The 15-minute visual checks between 11 and 2 became automatic fast. I ran them on the platform without a timer because my internal clock calibrated to the interval within the first week. Something about the rhythm of the beach, the way the crowd noise cycled, the way the sun moved, produced a reliable internal prompt at the 15-minute mark that I stopped questioning and started trusting. Zone 1 through Zone 4, bottom visible, flags present, swimmer count logged. Zone 3 and Zone 4 were always clear. Shallow enough that on a direct sun midday the sandy bottom was visible in sharp detail, the occasional shell or buried sandbar edge readable from the platform with no effort. The checks produced nothing. For 3 weeks, and I ran them anyway, because the rule said to, and because the alternative was sitting on the platform for 8 hours with nothing to do, and a check gave my eyes something to do other than go soft from the heat. Drift ran his own patrol below me with the same consistency. Waterline to Zone 1 flag, waterline to Zone 4 flag, back again. He did not vary the route, and he did not abbreviate it when the heat was bad, which it was every day by noon. I started timing him without meaning to. The way I timed everything, that repeated. The way my brain filed intervals and patterns automatically. His full patrol took between 4 and 6 minutes, depending on the crowd density on the sand, and he ran it continuously from the time I opened the beach to the time I closed it, with one break in the early afternoon when Gordo brought him water in a collapsible bowl from the utility truck. He drank, he waited, he went back to the waterline. I watched him the way I watched everything from the platform. Flat attention, sustained, waiting for the moment something changed. It was on my 9th shift that I noticed the water in Zone 4. I was running the 11 o'clock check, bottom visible in Zone 1, Zone 2, Zone 3, all clear. The sandy bottom sharp in the direct sun, a few shells, the shadow of a small mullet school moving south. Zone 4, bottom visible, clear, and the surface wrong. Not dramatically wrong. The Gulf that day had a light chop, maybe 2 inches of surface movement, the kind of small, irregular texture that a moderate onshore breeze produces on shallow water. Zone 1 through Zone 3 had it. Zone 4 did not. Zone 4 was flatter than the rest of the zone. Not the full flat that Rule 2 described. Not no surface movement, just less. A damping. The chop present everywhere else reduced in that specific area to something smoother. The surface there behaving as if the wind was slightly less, or the water slightly more resistant to it. I looked at it for a full minute. Then I wrote in the incident log, Zone 4 surface variance, 11:04 a.m., light chop elsewhere, reduced in Z4. Possible sandbar shift affecting surface tension. I logged it as a note, not an incident. I ran the rest of the check. By 11:20, the variance was gone and Zone 4 looked like the rest of the Gulf, and I told myself, sandbar, thermal layer. The shallow Gulf does strange things in direct sun, and most of them have mundane causes. I believed it well enough to finish the shift. Below me, Drift paused at the Zone 4 flag on his next pass and stood there for a moment longer than his usual pace required, looking at the water, before he turned and continued south. The Rule 4 trigger happened on a Tuesday in the 3rd week of June at 1:20 in the afternoon. which was peak crowd and peak sun, and the worst possible time for something to require my full attention because peak crowd meant the water was full, and clearing it was going to be a production. Woman came out of the water at Zone 3. She was maybe 45, in a one-piece suit the color of coral, and she walked up the wet sand to the base of the platform with the specific unhurried quality of someone who has decided to report something and has already composed what she is going to say. She looked up at me and said someone touched her leg. Below the knee, she said. In water, she could stand in flat-footed. She was calm, not shaken, not the elevated affect of someone who had been frightened, just a woman reporting a fact in a factual tone because she thought it was the kind of thing the person on the platform should know. I asked her which zone. She said the line between Zone 3 and Zone 4, maybe a little north. I thanked her and I blew the whistle, 2 short, then 1 long. And I ran the clear water signal with both arms, and I watched the swim zone empty, which took about 4 minutes because peak crowd does not move fast, and some people need the signal repeated before they accept that it applies to them personally. I did not ask her to describe what touched her. Rule 4 was specific about that, and I followed it, which meant I was standing on the platform with a cleared swim zone and a calm woman at the base of my platform, and no description of what she had felt below the knee in 4 feet of water at the Zone 3 and Zone 4 boundary. I logged it as jellyfish contact, 1:20 p.m., Zone 3 North, single report, zone cleared per protocol. I called the county line. Sandra said reopen in 20 minutes if no further reports and to log any additional contacts on the standard form. I said I would. I hung up. I looked at the water. The swim zone was empty and the Gulf was doing what the Gulf does, flat and warm and shallow and giving nothing away about what was or was not moving through it below the surface. The 20 minutes passed without a second report. I ran the reopen signal and the crowd went back in and the beach returned to its rhythm and the woman in the coral suit did not go back in the water. She sat in a rental chair at the top of the dry sand and read a book and did not look at the Gulf for the rest of the afternoon, with the specific settled quality of someone who has made a decision and is comfortable with it. I noticed that. I noticed it the way I noticed drift during those 20 minutes, because drift for the full duration of the cleared zone did not sit at the waterline. He sat at the base of the platform steps, both front paws on the bottom step, amber eyes, on the water, not moving. I had not seen him leave the waterline during beach hours before that day. I told myself he tracked the crowd. When the water was empty, there was nothing to patrol, so he repositioned to the next closest point, which was the platform. That was a reasonable thing for a dog to do. I watched him for a moment and then I watched the water and then the zone was open and the crowd was back in and drift was at the waterline again and everything was as it should be, mostly, in the way that things are as they should be right up until they aren't. The Rule 2 trigger happened on a Tuesday in the second week of July at 12:44 in the afternoon, and I want to be precise about the time because precision is the only thing I have left to offer about what happened in those 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Was mid-scan on the 11 o'clock check, which was running late because a kid had gotten his foot caught in the rope line at Zone 2 and I had spent 12 minutes on the platform talking his father through the untangle rather than going down. Myself, which Rule 2's do not enter instruction had trained me into as a general habit without my fully noticing. When Zone 3 went flat. Then Zone 4. Not together exactly. Zone 3 first, then Zone 4 maybe 2 seconds later the surface movement. Dying in each zone the way a signal dies when the source is cut, immediate and complete. The rest of the Gulf continued its light chop. The swim zone between Zone 3 and Zone 4 went still in the specific way that Rule 2 described, and that I had not seen in full until that moment. The surface sitting motionless while the water on every side of it moved normally, the boundary between the flat and the chop as clean and defined as a line drawn on the water. My hand was on the whistle before I finished reading the surface. 1 long blast. I did not wait to confirm. Rule 2 said do not wait to confirm, and I did not wait to confirm, and I will tell you plainly that not waiting was not a rule-following decision in that moment. It was a physical decision, the kind the body makes before the reasoning catches up. The crowd in the water responded the way crowds respond, the people nearest the whistle moving first, the people further out taking the repeat signal, the people in Zone 3 and Zone 4 moving south and shoreward with the specific reluctant shuffle. Of people who are inconvenienced and do not yet understand that inconvenience is the best available outcome. I counted them out. 11, 12, a teenage boy in Zone 4, moving slowly, waist deep, turning toward shore with the unhurried pace of someone who has decided the lifeguard is being cautious rather than correct. I watched him move. He was maybe 60 feet out, waist deep, the flat water around him sitting still while he pushed through it toward shore, and my weight was forward on the platform rail and my hand was on the rail and I was watching the flat water around him and reading it the way I had been trained to read surface behavior in that classroom in Jacksonville. Not as weather, not as geology, but as displacement. The specific flat that means something below the surface is displacing it evenly from underneath with the slow, controlled movement of something large enough and still enough to hold the surface tension without breaking it. The boy moved south. I blew the whistle again. He moved a little faster. He reached Zone 2 and the flat did not follow him and he came out of the water and shook the water from his hair the way teenagers shake water from their hair, unconsciously, unbothered. And he did not know that he had been walking through something that was not water in the way water is water, and I was glad he did not know. And I watched him until he was on the dry sand and I did not look away from him until he was. I exhaled and the flat held and I stood on the platform and kept the zone clear and watched the still water and did not enter it and did not take my eyes off it for 4 minutes and 29 seconds until the surface movement returned. Not gradually, not a slow reintroduction of chop, but a resumption, like a switch, the flat releasing all at once and the gulf going back to what it had been doing before whatever had been below it decided to stop being below it. I logged it. Flat water event, 12:44 p.m., zones 3 and 4, duration 4 minutes 30 seconds, zone cleared per Rule 2 protocol, no swimmers in zone at event end, surface movement resumed 12:49 p.m. I called the county line. Sandra said to note it as a weather variance and reopen at my discretion. I said I would. I looked at the water for another 10 minutes before I reopened. During those 10 minutes, I became aware that drift was not at the waterline. I looked down. He was at the base of the platform steps, both front paws on the bottom step, and he had not been there when the flat started. I had not seen him move, which meant he had moved without my noticing, which meant he had moved fast. He was looking at the water with the amber eyes that tracked what mattered and filtered everything else, and what they were tracking was Zone 4, and he did not move from the step until I reopened the zone and the crowd went back in. And when he went back to the waterline, he went to the Zone 4 flag and stood there for a long moment before he continued his patrol. The way you stand at a place where something happened to confirm that it is over. And then he moved south and I watched him go, and I did not reopen the incident log because I did not know what I would add to it, that the 4 minutes and 30 seconds did not already say. The child was a boy, maybe 4 years old, in red swim shorts and a rash guard the color of a tennis ball, and he came over the dune line at 1:08 p.m. on a Friday in the 3rd week of July without anyone appearing to notice him do it. I noticed him at the waterline. He was already there by the time I picked him up in my scan, standing at the wet sand with the specific fearless curiosity of a 4-year-old encountering the Gulf of Mexico, which is to say he walked straight in without pausing to consider it, ankle deep, knee deep. The rash guard bright against the flat blue of the Gulf, moving north along the waterline the way small children move in water, without direction, following whatever the water did next. I was managing a situation at Zone 1. 2 teenagers who had gotten outside the southern flag line and needed redirecting, a routine thing, 30 seconds of whistle and arm signal. I saw the child at the periphery of my scan and I registered him and I was already turning back to the Zone 1 situation when I saw where he was heading, which was north, which was Zone 3, which was going to be Zone 4 in about 90 seconds at the pace he was moving. I blew the whistle and ran the clear signal and the crowd in the water started moving and the child did not move because he was 4. And the whistle was not a concept he had a framework for yet. And the Gulf was interesting. And he kept going north. I came off the platform. I was 30 yards south of him and moving, and he was knee-deep in Zone 3, moving toward Zone 4, and the math was not in my favor. I saw drift register the child at the same moment I came off the steps, the amber eyes finding the yellow rash, guard. The body already moving, low and fast along the wet sand in the way a dog moves when it has decided and is not deliberating. Drift hit the waterline at a full run and did not stop. Into the Gulf, past the point he had not crossed in 3 years, the water coming up to his chest, and then his shoulders as the bottom dropped slightly in Zone 4, moving toward the child. With the direct economy of an animal that knows exactly what it is doing and is not afraid of the water. He was wrong about that last part. Or maybe he was not afraid and went in anyway, which is a different thing and worse. He reached the child in Zone 4. He took the boy's forearm gently in his mouth, not biting, the soft grip of a retrieval, the kind of hold that does not leave a mark. And he turned him toward shore and walked him out, the child laughing and grabbing at Drift's ears because he thought it was a game, and maybe it was a game, maybe the best possible outcome of a thing that could have gone many ways was a 4-year-old laughing in the Gulf while a large sand-colored dog walked him back to the dry sand. I reached them at the waterline. I took the child and held him and scanned the beach for a parent, who materialized 30 seconds later from the rental chair area running and grateful and apologetic in the way parents are when they have been frightened badly enough to forget to be angry first. I handed the child over. I looked at Drift. He was standing at the waterline. Wet to the shoulder, the short coat plastered flat, the water running off him in lines. He was not looking at me. He was looking at Zone 4, at the water he had just come out of, with both front paws at the exact waterline boundary and his weight back, slightly. The posture of an animal that has moved away from something and is monitoring the distance. Not the posture of a dog after a swim. The posture of a dog that went into a place it knew better than to go and came back out and is now conducting an assessment of whether coming back out was the end of it. He stood there for a long time. I stood next to him for a while, and then I went back to the platform and logged the child. Minor, unattended, redirected, no incident. And I did not log Drift because there was no form for what Drift had done or what Drift was doing now at the waterline, which was standing in the same spot for the rest of my shift, not patrolling, not moving, watching Zone 4 with the amber eyes that tracked what mattered and had just confirmed, in the only way available to him, that Zone 4 mattered more than he had weight to spend on it. He was at the platform base when I arrived the next morning, not the waterline. The base of the steps, both front paws on the bottom step, in the position I had seen him take twice before, once during the jellyfish contact clear, once during the flat water event. Gordo was at the shower station with his utility truck, and I asked him if Drift had been like this before, if there had been other mornings like this. Gordo looked at the dog for a moment and then looked at me and said, "He knows." He said it the way you say something you have known for a long time and have not said out loud, because saying it out loud makes it a thing you have to do something about. Then he went back to the shower station, and Drift stayed on the step, and I went up to the platform and opened the log and looked at Zone 4, and the water was flat in the specific way it was always flat out there, the way I had noted on my 9th shift as a possible sandbar effect. And I understood now that it had never been a sandbar. 6 days after Drift went into Zone 4, the beach was at full Saturday capacity. Parking lot full by 9:30. The sand packed from the dune line to the water line. The Gulf full of people who had driven from Newport Richey and Spring Hill and Lando Lakes for a Saturday in July on the Gulf Coast, which is one of the better things a person can do with a Saturday in July if you do not know what I know now about that particular stretch of water. I was on the platform at 12:51 p.m. running the 15-minute check. Zone 1, clear, bottom visible, 8 swimmers. Zone 2, clear, bottom visible, 14 swimmers. Zone 3, clear, bottom visible, 11 swimmers. A family of 4 at the northern edge of Zone 3 moving slowly toward Zone 4. 2 adults waist deep, 2 children smaller than that, all 4 of them moving north with the aimless drift of people who are warm and happy and not watching the flags. Zone 4. I read the surface before I finished the count. The surface of Zone 4 was flat. Not the partial flat I had logged on my 9th shift. Not the reduced chop. Flat, the full flat, no surface movement, no wind response, a circle of still. Water maybe 20 feet across, sitting in the middle of otherwise normal Gulf chop, with its edges as defined as a boundary drawn by something that knew exactly where it wanted to be. My hand went to the whistle. The family was at the Zone 3 and Zone 4 boundary. The two adults waist deep, the two children chest deep, still moving north, not looking at the flags because people do not look at flags when they are warm and happy, and the water is shallow and the Gulf looks like nothing in the world could go wrong in it. I read the flat the way I had been trained to read surface behavior, not as a weather condition, not as a sandbar effect, not as anything that had an explanation available in the year, part of my training that dealt with things that have names. I read it as displacement. The specific flat that means something below the surface is displacing it evenly from underneath with the slow, controlled movement of something large enough and still enough to hold the surface tension without breaking. It, moving at a depth shallow enough that the displacement reached the top, which in Zone 4 meant it was not deep, which meant it was close, which meant the family of 4 was about to walk into 20 feet of still water with whatever was holding it still from below. I blew the whistle. One long blast, both arms up, the full clear signal. The family stopped. The adults looked at me. The children looked at the adults. Nobody moved for a moment. The specific frozen second of a crowd receiving a signal they were not expecting on a day that had given them no reason to expect one. I blew it again. Move south. Both arms, the direction clear, the signal repeated, and the family turned, and I watched them turn, and I watched them move south, and I watched the flat, and I kept watching the flat, and the flat held. At the edge of the flat, at the boundary between the still water and the normal chop, the clean defined line where Zone 4's stillness met the moving Gulf, something moved along that boundary from below. Not breaking the surface, moving along it, tracing the inner edge of the flat water from underneath, the way a shape moves when it is following the boundary of its own stillness, learning the edges of the space it had made. It went north, slow. The boundary trace taking, maybe 40 seconds from the southern edge of the flat to the northern edge, moving against the light current the way Rule 5 describes something moving against the current after 6 p.m. The same direction, the same quality of movement, in the middle of a Saturday afternoon with 200 people on the beach and 11 swimmers in the water south of Zone 3, who did not know that 40 feet north of them something was tracing, the edge of a circle it had made in the Gulf of Mexico and had made before and would make again. It reached the Zone 4 flag post. The post moved. 1 degree, maybe less. The fiberglass flexing slightly, the yellow flag shifting, the base sand disturbing in the loose dark way of ground that has been disturbed before. The same ground I had noticed on my first morning and filed under maintenance, replaced it recently. The post had not been replaced by maintenance. The post had been replaced because something had moved it and someone had reset it and someone had written a rule about what to do if it happened again. The flat broke. Not gradually. The surface released all at once and the chop returned and Zone 4 was Gulf water again, warm and shallow and giving nothing away. I was on the platform with both hands on the rail and my weight forward and the whistle still in my hand and the beach behind me going about its Saturday business. The crowd on the sand not knowing anything had happened because nothing had happened that they could see, which is the thing about this particular stretch of water. It does not show you what it is doing. It shows you the surface. And the surface looks like nothing in the world could go wrong in it. Drift was at the platform base, both front paws on the bottom step. He had not made a sound during any of it. No bark, no whine, nothing. And he was not making a sound now. He was looking at Zone 4 with the amber eyes that had been reading that water longer than I had. And what they were reading now was the return of the chop, the restoration of the normal surface. And I watched him read it the way I had watched. Him read it every day for a summer, and after a long moment he took his front paws off the bottom step and sat back on the sand. Not a relaxation exactly, a recognition. The thing had moved on, or gone back to wherever it went when it was not tracing the edges of a circle in Zone 4. And Drift knew it the way he knew everything about that water. Before it was visible, before it was confirmable, before it was the kind of thing you could put in an incident log and have anyone believe. I closed the zone early. I logged the flat, duration 6 minutes 12 seconds, Zone 4, boundary movement observed along inner surface edge, flag post displacement, noted, zone cleared per Rule 2 protocol, no swimmers in Zone 4 at event onset. I sat on the platform for 20 minutes after the last swimmer left the water and the beach started to thin, and the Saturday afternoon light went gold over the Gulf and the water looked the way it always looked, which was like nothing was wrong with it. And I sat there and read the surface of Zone 4 until the light was too low to read it clearly. And then I climbed down, and Drift walked with me to the parking lot, which he had never done before, and I sat in the Corolla for a while, and he sat on the asphalt next to the driver's door, and we stayed like that until Gordo came to get him. And then I drove back to the sublet in Newport Richey, and I ran a bath I did not get into and sat on the bathroom floor next to the tub for 40 minutes, and the water in the tub was still, and I did not look at it. I closed out the incident log, filed the county form for the Flatwater event, and locked the platform before I left the beach that Saturday. I did all of this correctly, and in order because the order was the only thing I had, and I was not going to stop doing it correctly now. The county form had a field for event type, and I wrote weather variance because that was what the county line had told me to write after the first flat, and I did not have a different category available, and I was not going to invent one on a county form that would sit in a filing cabinet in Newport Richey for 7 years before anyone looked at it again, if anyone looked at it at all. Called the county line on Sunday morning and told them I was closing Zone 4 indefinitely pending a flagpost inspection. Sandra said that required a supervisor sign-off, and I said I understood, and I closed it anyway and put in the sign-off request and did not reopen Zone 4 for the remaining 3 weeks of my contract. The supervisor called me on Monday and asked about the closure, and I told him about the flagpost displacement and the 2 Flatwater events and the duration logs, and he was quiet for a moment, and then he said he would note it in the facility file. He did not tell me to reopen Zone 4. I thought about that for a long time afterward. The fact that he did not push back, did not question the closure, did not ask for more than I had given him. The fact that he said he would note it in the facility file in the tone of a man who has added things to that file before and knows what kind of file it is. I finished the summer contract and did not renew it. The $6,200 came down to $4,080 by the end of August, which was not finished but was enough to defer the rest without penalty, which was enough to leave. I drove back to Ocala in the borrowed Corolla on a Tuesday in September with everything I had brought to Newport Richey in 2 bags in the back seat, and the Gulf behind me getting smaller in the rear view and then gone behind the tree line, and then just a direction, west, which I have not driven toward since. My mother made dinner and did not ask why I was back early, and I did not explain, and we ate, and I washed the dishes, and I went to bed in the room that still had the same curtains it had when I was 16, and I slept for 11 hours, which was the most I had slept in one stretch since June. I still read water. I cannot stop doing it. It is in the habit permanently, the way a reflex stays after the thing that built it is gone. I read the surface of every body of water I pass, which in Central Florida means I am reading water constantly. Retention, ponds, drainage canals, the lakes that sit between the subdivisions in Ocala like punctuation. I read them for flat. I look at the surface and I check for the specific stillness that should not be there, the stillness that does not respond to wind, the boundary between the still and the moving that is too clean to be a weather condition. I have not seen it since Pasco Beach. I check anyway. I will probably check for the rest of my life, which is a thing I have accepted about myself, the way you accept the things that are not going to change because something happened that made them permanent. I do not swim in open water. This is the most concrete thing that changed, not a fear exactly, more like an informed decision made by someone who has read the surface of Zone 4 and knows what the flat means and has decided that the Gulf of Mexico and everything connected to it is a place where the rules exist for a reason, and the reason is still out there moving along the boundary of a circle in water too shallow to hide in and doing it anyway. Drift is still at Pasco Beach Access Point 7 as far as I know. Gordo sent me a message in October with a photograph of him at the waterline. Amber eyes, sand-colored coat, the Zone 4 flag visible in the background. He did not write anything in the message, just the photograph. I looked at it for a long time, and then I put my phone down, and I have not looked at it again, but I have not deleted it either, which is probably its own kind of answer about where I am with all of it. If you swim on the Gulf Coast, and it is a good coast, I want to be clear about that. Most of it is exactly what it looks like, and what it looks like is warm and shallow and easy and fine. Watch the surface. Not for waves, not for chop, not for the things the water does that have names and explanations. Watch for the flat, The specific flat where the surface stops responding to the wind in a defined area while everything around it keeps moving. If you see it, get out. Do not wait to confirm what it is. Do not look for what is holding the surface still from below. Do not point at it. Do not call out. Do not do anything that tells it you have seen it. Get out of the water and get away from the waterline and get to high ground and wait for the surface to go back to normal. And if you are on a Gulf beach after 6 p.m. and you see something moving north along the shoreline in the surf zone, low in the water moving against the current, do not point at it. Do not blow a whistle. Do not call out to the people around you. Wait until it is past the northernmost flag and then walk to your car and drive away from the coast and do not look at the water on the way out. The rules are there because someone needed them badly enough to write them down and lock them in a box on a platform in Pasco County and hope the next person found them in time. I found them in time. I want the same for you.